This is a documentary video to show the process that I'm learning about animation in Cinema 4D with Vray. I'm going to whiz through this quite quick because there's a number of steps and things I've got to remember to get in this video. So first of all, the animation setup. We want to get out multiple files for the animation. Now I want to run it through a denoiser, a standalone denoiser, which is an external tool. And to show you this, the external tool is found in the C program files chaos group tools. Now by default, this, wherever it is there, the Vray denoise, you can't double click on it and open it up. Luckily there's a kind guy that's written a GUI for it, and he's allowed me to have it for free to test it for him. And this basically is a graphic user interface that runs this. Normally you would have to run a command prompt and you have to remember all the commands. This makes things far more easier. I'm going to come back to this a little bit later on. I just wanted to introduce some of these tools that we're going to be using. In addition to this tool, we're going to be using another tool, and it's called Vray Image, or VRIMG to EXR. This one you can double click on and open up, and I will explain more about this later on. This is a file converter. Heading back into Cinema 4D, we've got our animation. I've got a jiggle deformer on the character, and I've cached it so that it's going to basically run properly. It's taken quite a bit, 628 megabytes to cache this. It's only for a 30-second animation. So I'm just going to play this animation back just briefly. There he goes, and he stands there for a minute and then he walks off. Pretty simple animation. And then he goes around behind those boxes. Okay, that's the animation. Now for the setup. So for the setup, make sure you know what frames per second you're working in. If you want it to be consistent, this is at 30 frames per second. Next thing is you want to make sure that you go into your settings. This is very important. To export multipass images, you have to make sure that you turn on the checkbox for multipass and then add from this button here RGB image and post effect. This is so that Vray can work with its multipassing. Another thing which is also important, which is in the Vray bridge, you've got this color mapping, and by default it's set to auto. Now the auto is looking at a setting inside the Cinema 4D render settings to basically choose what it should be doing. In other words, it's going to choose one of these three options. And what this color mapping is for is to whether it's going to be applying a 2.2 gamma baked down into the image. Now if it's a single image, that's absolutely fine, but when you're doing multipass images, you do not want to bake down your gamma. So in order for the auto to work correctly, we need to go to our save here and make sure that the depth is 32-bit. It can be any format up here, it doesn't really matter because we're not going to be saving it. You can take the save off because we don't need to be saving this because we're going to be using a different method. With that said, that's the settings for that. Now when we go to this, it's going to automatically choose the right mode. Now within the Vray bridge, we have to choose show Vray or Vray frame buffer window. This is basically where you're going to be rendering. Now when you're rendering, for the use of denoising especially, you have to have this Vray frame buffer on because it exports additional elements or multipasses. They're called elements in Vray. If you're just going to do an image in which it's a single image and you wanted to use the denoiser, you must make sure that you use this and turn it on. So the next settings is in the Vray bridge. We go to Vray bridge multipass manager, and the minimum that you need if you're going to use a denoiser is just the denoiser. Now even though you've set the denoiser, it doesn't mean that this comes with nothing. Okay, in other words, it doesn't show you all of the layered files that are actually going to be generated from this. It's not until you start to do your render that you'll realize just how many passes there actually is. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to open up just one of these files inside Photoshop to show you how many passes there is. This is the one I've done earlier on. You can see here that we've got loads of passes in here, and a majority of these passes that we see in here are actually for the use of the denoiser. That's what they're used for. That's their basic use. So I just thought I'd mention that. This is not anything to do with the compositing of your image to do any post work. Although you can use some of these images, but that's something different entirely. But for the basics, you just need the denoiser. You want to have it on only generate unrendered elements and denoise render elements separately. And the preset is to be strong. Use hardware acceleration. Now, by selecting this, it's not going to do any denoising as such. It's going to leave it to create what's called a denoise file. I'll just open this again to show you. It's going to create a special denoise file, and this denoise file is going to basically, we'll turn these off. It's going to tell the denoiser, the standalone, where all of the noise is, so that it knows how to do the denoising. So that's how it works. Once you set that up, then you can go ahead and do your render. Now, when you go to do your rendering for animation, it's particularly important that you go and set your output here. If you can do a still image, you just simply hit render, and in the Vray frame buffer, you just save it from there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change this from just temporarily. I'm going to change this from the frame range to just a current frame, just so I can show you this, and make sure everything else is off for the moment. I'm going to come back to this in a minute. So for a still image, you just hit that, it's going to render it. You should have to turn on your display colors and RGB space so you can get the render. If it's a still image like this, you simply go up to here, hold it down and select save as image channels, and then make sure you save it as a Vray image file format. If you're going to be doing an animation, you do have a slightly different setup. For an animation, of course, you're going to have all of the frames that you want. I'm going to go, say, from 0 to 900 frames. But in the Vray bridge, we go to the translator and we click on Save Vray Frame Buffer Images. Now, if you open this up, you choose the format Vray IMG, and make sure that wherever you send it to, you type in the name at the end, including the extension, which is Vray IMG. If you don't, it won't automatically add it. It'll just add it as a blank file. You can do resumable rendering, but there's no point when you're doing this unless you've got a very long render for a still image. That's when you would do resumable rendering. So with that said, what will happen is that it will export multiple Vray images into your chosen folder, and it will look something like this. And I'll just go into here, and you see here Vray image. Now, the Vray image file format is very important because I've already stated that it actually holds multiple layers or elements. If you save it as any other file type, it will not hold these elements, and you need those elements for denoising. So once you get to the point where you've got this, we then need to move on to the next stage, which is denoising. So when we go to the denoising stage, we open up this Vray denoiser, and all you have to do for an animation, make sure you turn frames on. I'm starting from 100 to 900 because I stopped it halfway through. You can continue to start from a different point if you wanted to have a break. And then what you can do is you can set your strength. Now what I recommend is just grab one of your single files of your V-Ray image, select it in here and turn off frame range and just denoise the still. By doing this you're going to see whether you need to up your strength or not, or down. And then you can go ahead to select the same file or the first file. It's only the first image file, 000. It will find the rest. And then basically you turn on frame range 0 to whatever it is, and then you will hit denoise animation. You can save the preset if you want to come back to it at another time, if you could do it in different sessions. Now when it does this, what it's going to do is it's going to save the same file type, but you'll see here it's got this extension, or it changes the name slightly. It says denoised. Now once you've got all of these denoised files, you're not going to be able to do a lot with the V-Ray image file type, so you need to convert this to an EXR file, which most applications can use, including Photoshop. So to do this you use the V-Ray to EXR converter. Now all you have to do, I select no compression in my particular case. You select your input file, so these are the denoised, so you select that, and you want to denoise the whole entire lot. If it's not a still image, then what you do is you change it from single input to multiple input. The input directory is where your denoised file is, all your denoised files. So make sure that you've got your denoised files in a separate folder when you finish doing your denoising. And you can see I've added one here where it's only got denoised. So your input would be directed to that. Your output directory can be to wherever you want, so you can choose to have a separate folder like up this output file. When you do this, it's going to start to convert your V-Ray image files into EXR files. I'm going to show you this now. Input directory, it's located in here. Okay, input file denoised. Okay, click OK, and then the output directory I'm going to choose to be somewhere different. Just call that output, and then once you've done that you can just click on convert. Now you notice in the available channels there is only one, because that's all available, because once you do the denoising process, what it essentially does is it will just take away all of your channels that it used and it breaks it all down. This gives you basically your full composited file. When you click on convert, what it's going to do is it's going to whiz through it pretty quick, and these are all EXR files, and it's these EXR files that you can load to Photoshop or your compositing software to produce your movie. Now I'm going to just cancel this because I've just started this process off. The only way you can load in these EXR files, or shall I say V-Ray image files, into Photoshop is if you download a plugin, and this plugin is called Pro EXR, and Pro EXR is a plugin for Photoshop, and it allows you to load up these V-Ray image files into Photoshop. The reason why you would want to do that is because before your denoising process you may want to do some changes to your file, but that's only if it's a single image file. So if it's a single image file, you may want to bring in your V-Ray image file into Photoshop and do some basic post work on it, save it back out as an EXR. It can only be done when you've got Pro EXR plugin to retain all the layers, but that's a separate video. In our case we're looking at animation, so you have to do compositing in a proper compositing piece of software. So that's really the process of getting through it from A to B and out the other end with the animation files, which is this. Now, in addition to this, I've been working closely with the maker of this program here, the Vray Denoiser GUI, and he tells me that once you run your denoising, it's only going to obviously output one single file, your RGB, but the chances are you may want additional outputs for your compositing inside your video compositor. So for this, what you can do is you can go back to your original pre-denoised files and then export any multi-passes that are from it. I'm going to show you this now. So I'm going to go back to here. Let's go back through. There it is. Animation, output version 2. Okay, and these are directing to the raw Vray image files that were exported. Make sure that you've always got your denoised files in a separate folder, because they will be processed separately. And then basically what happens is you're able to run multiple versions of this tool. And I'm just going to close some of these down just so it becomes a little bit more clearer what we're looking at. Right. I'm not sure which one I was working on now. Let's have a look. Version 2. Okay, we'll close that. You see, you can open up multiple ones. I'm going to show you why you would want to open up multiple ones. So I've gone to the raw files that have been exported via Vray. These are pre-denoised files. I've already got my denoised versions in here, as you've already seen. These are just RGB files. It's 32-bit still. What I can do is I can select from all the available channels. And this can be helpful if I want to do some compositing or some post work within my external compositor, whichever video one that's going to be, like After Effects. So for instance, you may want to adjust some lighting. So I'm going to go, okay, I just want to export lighting. So what I can do is I can go to the output directory, animation test, and what I could do is I can create a new folder in the out, for instance, and I'll call this light pass, and it's only going to output the light pass. Now when I click convert, it's going to convert it to EXR for us, but you'll notice where is it? Version 2.
What happens next is down to them. The saying goes,
Seeing where the output directory is. Out. Okay, it was.
are all hoping that it's true. You are bonkers.
Light pass. And if I was to open up one of these inside Photoshop, you'll see that this is only containing light pass information. You see there? And this can be loaded in as a separate composite. I could have one for Z depth and multiple outputs. So you can see here the power of this. This also means that when you're in Photoshop, even though I dealt with very basics in here, when you go to your Vray Bridge and Multipass Manager, you may want to add some specific ones that you're going to want for compositing so that you can use separately. So for instance, GI, caustic, subsurface scattering, any of these, even Z depth and stuff like that. See the Z depth one?
I can do this with my fingers.
You can extract that separately, and you can do that with multiple instances of the Vray to EXR import. So you can have one there for extracting lighting. We open another one.
My passion is fitness. Like, I'm always out running or in a gym. I go yoga 3 times a week as well.
Go for the same thing again, the same process. So we go to the raw files, and first of all make sure it's multiple because it's an animation, and you go back there and you select the raw file again, but this time you will select something else like Z depth, and then you can run another one, and it's going to basically extract all of the additional multi-passes that you want along with your beauty pass, which is basically your denoised version. There's your beauty pass. Just open that up quickly. This is the denoised version. You can see the denoiser has done a fantastic job. See there, it really has done a really good job. Okay, and that's really the process. The next process video is going to be about compositing it. That's something I've yet to learn how to do.